Imagine holding in your hand a device so small it fits in your pocket, yet so powerful it has transformed the way millions of people communicate, work, and even think. Every day, billions of interactions happen across screens and devices, most powered by a company that just decades ago was on the brink of collapse. Picture a time when its own founders doubted its future, when investors questioned its potential, and when the world didn't yet recognize the revolution it was about to unleash. How does a company go from a tiny garage in California to shaping global culture, redefining industries, and becoming a symbol of innovation and aspiration? The answer is a story of vision, obsession, brilliance, and relentless ambition. Before we dive deeper, if stories of extraordinary business success and strategy intrigue you, stick around. The lessons embedded in this journey aren't just for tech enthusiasts, they're for anyone who wants to understand how audacious ideas become global empires. The story begins in 1976 in Los Altos, California. Two young men, Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak, shared a dream that seemed impossible at the time: to make computers personal, accessible, and elegant. Wozniak had the technical mastery to design a fully functional computer in his bedroom, wiring circuits and programming software with meticulous care. Jobs had a vision, a sense that a machine could be more than utility, that it could inspire, connect, and captivate. Together, they embarked on a venture that would eventually change the world. They worked in a small garage, surrounded by cardboard boxes, circuit boards, and a handful of components they could barely afford. Their first creation, the Apple I, was a modest machine by today's standards, but in that small device lay the seeds of a revolution. Their first customer wasn't a tech giant, it was a local electronics store willing to take a chance on two young men with more ambition than resources. Jobs' insistence on perfection, Wozniak's precision in engineering, and their shared audacity created a product that was functional, innovative, and above all, visionary. Money was tight. They raised just $1,300 to buy the necessary parts. They spent countless nights assembling and testing machines that, to the untrained eye, seemed like mere wires and chips. But within those components was an idea that would eventually define an era. Apple wasn't just a product, it was a promise that technology could be personal, beautiful, and revolutionary. From the very beginning, Jobs understood that Apple had to be more than a computer company. He saw branding, culture, and user experience as inseparable from the machine itself. He imagined a world where computers weren't just tools for specialists, but companions for everyday life, objects people would desire, trust, and advocate for. Wozniak often focused on the mechanics, the circuits, the logic, while Jobs looked at the story behind the product, the emotional connection it could create. Together, they formed a rare partnership where technical genius met strategic vision. Even in these early days, the tension between vision and reality was palpable. Jobs' perfectionism often clashed with Wozniak's more practical approach. But these conflicts were not weaknesses, they were the friction that refined Apple's early products. The Apple I, small and humble as it was, marked the first spark of a journey that would span decades, innovations, failures, and triumphs. Within a year, they launched the Apple II. Unlike its predecessor, this machine was ready for a broader market. Its color graphics, expandability, and ease of use made it a favorite among hobbyists and early computer enthusiasts. Suddenly, Apple was not just a garage experiment, it was a company with potential, poised to challenge established norms. But even as early success appeared, the road ahead was far from smooth. In the quiet corners of that garage, among soldering irons and prototype boards, a revolution was quietly taking shape. The combination of Jobs' unyielding vision and Wozniak's technical mastery created more than computers. They created a blueprint for innovation. Every decision, every iteration, every sleepless night contributed to a foundation that would one day support a global empire. And it all started with two young men daring to believe that a small garage in California could change the world. Success, as often happens, did not come easily. After the launch of the Apple II, the company began to generate real revenue, and the world started to take notice. But beneath the surface, tension and uncertainty were simmering. Jobs' exacting vision, which had driven innovation, also created friction. Employees found themselves pushed to the limit, criticized publicly, and often forced to work in an environment where mistakes were not tolerated. The very drive that would make Apple extraordinary was also a source of conflict. Distribution was another hurdle. Getting Apple computers into stores, into homes, and into the hands of consumers was harder than designing the machines themselves. The technology was ahead of its time, but the infrastructure to support it was still nascent. Investors were impatient, competitors were ruthless, and the margin for error was vanishingly small. Every decision carried weight, and every misstep could mean financial disaster. Then there was IBM. The computing giant loomed over Apple like a shadow. Known for its dominance in corporate and enterprise computing, IBM had deep pockets, vast distribution channels, and decades of experience. Apple, with its small team and limited resources, suddenly had a formidable opponent. The question was not only how to innovate, but how to survive in a landscape dominated by established giants. And yet, amid these pressures, Apple created moments of brilliance. The Apple II became one of the first computers accessible to ordinary users. Its design, usability, and expandability set it apart from competitors. But the early wins could not mask internal strife. Jobs' relentless pursuit of perfection often alienated colleagues. In meetings, conflicts were fierce and tension was constant. He demanded absolute commitment, yet his vision was often ahead of what the team could realistically achieve. By 1983, cracks began to show. Leadership conflicts escalated, and the board of directors grew concerned about Jobs' management style. The clash between creativity and control, between vision and pragmatism, had reached a tipping point. In 1985, Jobs was forced out of the company he had co-founded, an ironic twist in a story that had seemed destined for triumph. Imagine a founder watching as his creation, his dream, continued without him, knowing that the road forward would be shaped by decisions he no longer controlled. At the same time, Apple faced technical and market challenges. Products were complex, and the user experience, though revolutionary, was inconsistent. Marketing missteps and rising competition from PC manufacturers created uncertainty. Every innovation carried risk, and every miscalculation was magnified by the intensity of the emerging tech market. Yet, even in these struggles, Apple's resilience began to show. The company survived internal upheavals, financial strain, and external threats. Its culture of innovation, however turbulent, had created something unique, a brand that could not be easily replicated. Lessons were learned the hard way. That leadership conflicts could be as dangerous as external competition, and that vision alone without execution could falter. By 1983, cracks began to show. Leadership conflicts escalated, and the board of directors grew concerned about Jobs' management style. The clash between creativity and control, between vision and pragmatism, had reached a tipping point. In 1985, Jobs was forced out of the company he had co-founded, an ironic twist in a story that had seemed destined for triumph. Imagine a founder watching as his creation, his dream, continued without him, knowing that the road forward would be shaped by decisions he no longer controlled. At the same time, Apple faced technical and market challenges. Products were complex, and the user experience, though revolutionary, was inconsistent. Marketing missteps and rising competition from PC manufacturers created uncertainty. Every innovation carried risk, and every miscalculation was magnified by the intensity of the emerging tech market. Yet, even in these struggles, Apple's resilience began to show. The company survived internal upheavals, financial strain, and external threats. Its culture of innovation, however turbulent, had created something unique, a brand that could not be easily replicated. Lessons were learned the hard way. That leadership conflicts could be as dangerous as external competition, and that vision alone, without execution, could falter.
It is in this period of early struggle and failure that the essence of Apple's story truly takes shape. The challenges, conflicts, and setbacks were not merely obstacles, they were shaping forces. They tested the limits of the company, forged resilience, and set the stage for the breakthroughs that would soon follow. From the brink of internal collapse and near financial instability, Apple was quietly preparing for a resurgence that would change the technology landscape forever. The story of failure, in many ways, was just the prelude to a tale of extraordinary comeback, innovation, and cultural influence that would define the company for decades to come.
By the mid-1990s, Apple was teetering on the edge. The company's products had lost their luster, profits were dwindling, and critics questioned whether it could survive another year. The brand that had once been synonymous with innovation now seemed fragile, vulnerable, and unsure of its own identity. Then, in 1997, Steve Jobs returned. Not as a visitor, not as a consultant, but as a force determined to reclaim, redefine, and reshape the company he had once co-founded. Jobs' return was more than symbolic, it was strategic. One of his first moves was the acquisition of Next, the company he had founded after leaving Apple, bringing not just technology, but a renewed sense of purpose, vision, and leadership. He looked at Apple's sprawling, unfocused product line and saw chaos. He saw a company losing touch with the simplicity, elegance, and aspiration that had once defined it. And he knew the remedy: focus. The launch of the iMac in 1998 marked a turning point not only for Apple, but for the computing industry as a whole. With its bold, translucent design and vibrant colors, the iMac was more than a computer, it was a statement. Apple was no longer just about technology, it was about identity, culture, and desire. People lined up to buy it, not just for its function, but for the experience it promised. The iMac represented a philosophy that technology could be beautiful, accessible, and emotionally engaging. Jobs' genius was in seeing beyond circuits and code. He understood that a product was more than hardware. It was a story, a vision, and an emotion. Every detail, from the curvature of the case to the ease of setup, was meticulously designed to create a seamless, delightful experience. Competitors could copy features, but they could not replicate the feeling of owning an Apple product. And Apple didn't stop there. The iMac's success paved the way for the iPod in 2001, which transformed not only music consumption, but the very way people interacted with technology. The iPod was simple, elegant, and irresistible. Coupled with iTunes, it created a complete ecosystem, bridging hardware, software, and content in a way no company had ever done before. This was Apple's renaissance, a blend of product innovation, ecosystem thinking, and cultural relevance. Jobs' approach during this breakthrough period was radical. He cut products, streamlined operations, and demanded focus. Every decision reinforced Apple's identity, design, simplicity, and integration. The company was no longer merely competing on specs or speed, it was competing on narrative, emotion, and lifestyle. The world began to take notice. Investors regained confidence. Media coverage turned from skepticism to admiration. Customers didn't just buy Apple products, they joined a movement. Perhaps the most striking aspect of this breakthrough was how it combined innovation with storytelling. Jobs knew that people remember experiences, not features. The iMac, the iPod, and later the iPhone were all pieces of a larger story, a story that connected technology, design, and human aspiration. Each product launch became an event, a spectacle, a shared cultural moment that reinforced Apple's brand as more than a company. It was a vision realized. From near collapse to cultural icon, Apple's breakthrough was not a single event. It was a carefully orchestrated series of moves, blending strategy, design, and narrative. It was proof that a company could reinvent itself, even after setbacks that would have ended many others.
Jobs' return wasn't just leadership, it was the catalyst for a revolution that would ripple across industries, inspiring competitors and setting new benchmarks for what a brand could achieve. And as Apple rose from the brink of failure, it was clear that this was only the beginning. The breakthrough had set the stage for something far larger, growth on a scale few companies ever achieve, and a strategic vision that would define not just products, but entire markets.
Apple's resurgence was not accidental. It was the result of deliberate strategy, meticulous planning, and an unwavering focus on excellence. Jobs understood that innovation alone would not sustain the company. He needed systems, structures, and strategies that could scale brilliance into dominance. The first key was vertical integration. Unlike competitors who outsourced hardware, software, or retail, Apple controlled every aspect of the user experience. Every iMac, iPod, and later iPhone was designed, manufactured, and marketed under Apple's watchful eye, ensuring consistency and quality that competitors could not replicate. The next breakthrough came in ecosystem thinking. Apple realized early that products alone were not enough. The experience had to be seamless across devices. iTunes turned the iPod into a platform, not just a music player. Later, the App Store would transform the iPhone from a device into a global marketplace, connecting developers, users, and content in an interdependent network. Each product drove engagement with the next, creating loyalty that went far beyond brand preference. It became habitual, almost addictive. Marketing was another pillar of Apple's growth strategy. Jobs turned product launches into spectacles. Keynotes became performances, carefully choreographed to build suspense, excitement, and anticipation. The launch of each device was more than an announcement. It was a cultural event, covered worldwide, creating hype that few competitors could match. Apple didn't just advertise products, it sold stories, emotions, and identity. People didn't just buy a phone, they bought into a vision. Expansion into retail was equally strategic. The first Apple stores, introduced in 2001, were not merely sales points. They were experiential spaces. Customers could interact with products, receive guidance, and immerse themselves in Apple's philosophy of simplicity and elegance. These stores reinforced the brand's image as premium, innovative, and customer-focused, and they became profitable faster than almost any traditional retail model. Apple's supply chain strategy was another secret weapon. Jobs insisted on strong relationships with suppliers, maintaining control while ensuring efficiency and quality. Inventory was tightly managed, production cycles carefully planned, and innovation timelines synchronized across hardware, software, and services. This precision allowed Apple to scale quickly without sacrificing the standard of excellence that defined the brand. Financial discipline and smart product sequencing also fueled growth. Jobs cut underperforming products, streamlined operations, and focused resources on high-impact initiatives. Each launch was deliberate, with clear objectives and measurable outcomes. The iPod, iPhone, and iPad were not isolated experiments. They were steps in a carefully orchestrated plan to dominate consumer electronics, create ecosystems, and expand Apple's cultural influence. Numbers illustrate the impact. By 2007, Apple's market capitalization had surpassed $100 billion, and iPhone sales had begun to reshape the global smartphone market. By 2010, Apple became the world's most valuable technology company, a feat few predicted just a decade earlier. Every growth decision, vertical integration, ecosystem thinking, marketing spectacles, retail innovation, supply chain mastery combined to transform Apple from a recovering company into an industry juggernaut. But this period was not without tension. The drive to scale excellence required discipline, sometimes at the expense of creativity or employee comfort. Jobs' leadership style remained demanding, often polarizing. Yet these challenges were part of what forged Apple's identity, a company that delivered excellence consistently, never settling for mediocrity, and always setting the benchmark for competitors worldwide.
Apple's growth strategy was not just about numbers. It was about narrative, experience, and culture. By combining product innovation with ecosystem thinking, marketing mastery, and operational excellence, Apple created not only financial success but a global phenomenon. This phase of the story demonstrates that scaling a brand is about more than expansion. It's about orchestrating every element of the business to reinforce a singular vision. And as Apple's influence spread across markets, devices, and cultures, it became clear that the strategies implemented during this era would define the company's trajectory for decades to come, creating a foundation for dominance, innovation, and cultural impact unlike anything the world had ever seen.
Even the most extraordinary stories carry moments of misstep, and Apple's journey is no exception. As the company scaled, mistakes, both strategic and operational, emerged, each leaving lessons etched into the organization's DNA. Some of these missteps were visible to the world, others hidden beneath the surface, but all shaped the trajectory of the company. One of the earliest high-profile missteps was the Apple III, launched in the early 1980s. Intended as a business computer to rival IBM, it failed due to engineering flaws and lackluster testing. Units overheated, glitches were frequent, and the market rejected it. This failure was a wake-up call that innovation without meticulous execution could be disastrous. Jobs himself learned that even visionary ideas needed rigorous technical grounding. The Newton Message Pad, Apple's first attempt at a personal digital assistant, suffered a similar fate. Launched in 1993, it was technologically ahead of its time, but its handwriting recognition was inaccurate and its pricing made it inaccessible to most consumers. The Newton struggles highlighted a fundamental tension in Apple's philosophy. The desire to innovate and lead often collided with the realities of market readiness and usability. Beyond product failures, Apple faced internal controversies. Jobs' leadership style was famously demanding and polarizing. He pushed employees to extremes, often publicly criticizing mistakes and demanding perfection. While this approach created a culture of excellence, it also generated internal resentment, burnout, and departures. His intensity, once a driving force for innovation, sometimes alienated even the most talented employees, revealing the human cost of building an empire. Labor practices in Apple's global supply chain also drew scrutiny. Reports surfaced of challenging working conditions in overseas factories, raising ethical questions about how far the company should go to maintain efficiency, control costs, and meet global demand. Apple responded with reforms over time, but these controversies lingered in public perception, reminding the world that even icons are not immune to criticism. Legal battles became another defining feature. Apple's aggressive protection of intellectual property, its high-profile lawsuits against competitors, and antitrust accusations placed the company under constant scrutiny. The famous dispute with Samsung over smartphone patents exemplified Apple's insistence on protecting its designs and ideas, but it also fueled debates about innovation, competition, and monopoly power. Financially, Apple occasionally faced strategic miscalculations. Pricing strategies, product launches, and expansion decisions were scrutinized, and some initiatives failed to meet expectations. Each of these challenges, however, reinforced a crucial lesson. Even a visionary company cannot escape mistakes, but resilience, adaptation, and learning can turn setbacks into stepping stones. Perhaps paradoxically, these controversies and missteps enhanced Apple's mystique. Customers in the media often framed failures not as weakness, but as evidence of ambition and risk-taking. Apple became a company that dared to push boundaries, sometimes failing spectacularly, yet consistently learning and returning stronger. It was a brand that thrived not despite its mistakes, but in part because it had the courage to make bold bets, to risk failure, and to redefine the rules of the industry. In this period, Apple's story illustrates a fundamental truth. Success is rarely linear. The path to dominance is littered with errors, controversies, and hard choices. But these moments, when confronted with courage, clarity, and strategy, can become the very forces that shape a company's identity,
fortify its culture, and prepare it for the next stage of extraordinary growth.
Today, Apple stands not just as a technology company, but as a cultural phenomenon. Its products, iPhones, MacBooks, AirPods, Apple Watches, are more than devices. They are symbols of design, status, and aspiration. Apple's market influence is staggering. Its valuation surpasses trillions, and its brand loyalty is unmatched, with millions of customers eagerly awaiting each new launch, often lining up overnight to experience the latest innovations. Apple's dominance is no accident. It is the result of decades of strategic foresight. One of its most powerful advantages is its ecosystem strategy. Devices, software, and services work seamlessly together. The iPhone connects with the MacBook, Apple Watch, AirPods, and iCloud. Each product strengthens the others, creating a network of interdependence that keeps customers engaged, invested, and often unwilling to switch to competitors. Innovation remains at the core of Apple's market leadership. Every device is meticulously designed, not just for functionality, but for an emotional connection. The tactile feel of an iPhone, the intuitive interface of macOS, the elegance of a MacBook's unibody design, all contribute to a sense of ownership that transcends utility. Apple doesn't just sell products, it sells experiences. Marketing continues to reinforce this dominance. Product launches are global events, watched by millions, generating buzz that no competitor has replicated. Advertising campaigns emphasize simplicity, aspiration, and lifestyle rather than technical specifications. Apple creates desire before the product even reaches stores, a phenomenon few companies can match. Financial metrics underline this supremacy. Apple consistently ranks among the top companies by market capitalization. Its iPhone dominates global smartphone sales, capturing a premium segment that generates the majority of its revenue. Services like Apple Music, iCloud, and Apple TV Plus provide recurring income streams, further solidifying financial resilience. The company's supply chain efficiency ensures it meets demand while maintaining profit margins, a rare balance in consumer electronics. Beyond numbers, Apple's dominance is evident in cultural influence. The company sets trends, shapes consumer expectations, and defines entire categories. The smartphone, the tablet, wearable technology, Apple did not always invent these, but it perfected, packaged, and popularized them in ways competitors could not replicate. Its influence extends into entertainment, fashion, health, and even education, making Apple a brand that permeates daily life worldwide. Yet, dominance comes with challenges. Competitors are relentless, regulatory scrutiny intensifies, and consumer expectations rise continuously. But Apple's advantage lies in its relentless focus on user experience, design, and ecosystem integration. Where others compete on features, Apple competes on loyalty, trust, and the intangible value of belonging to a brand that represents innovation, status, and excellence. In the modern marketplace, Apple has become a benchmark, not just for technology, but for strategy, branding, and cultural impact. It is a company that has turned product innovation, marketing mastery, and ecosystem thinking into a model of global dominance, illustrating how vision, execution, and design can combine to create a legacy few can rival.
Even as Apple dominates today, the story does not end here. The company that transformed personal computing, music, and mobile technology is now poised to redefine the future once again. Analysts, industry insiders, and consumers alike are watching closely, wondering what comes next for the brand that has set the standard for innovation, design, and cultural influence. One frontier is artificial intelligence and machine learning. Apple has quietly been integrating AI into its devices and services, from smarter personal assistants to predictive features across iOS and macOS. These technologies promise to make devices more intuitive, adaptive, and seamlessly integrated into everyday life. Imagine devices that anticipate your needs, optimize your work, and enhance your creativity, not reactively, but proactively, learning and evolving alongside you. Another frontier is augmented reality and virtual reality.
Rumors of Apple's mixed reality headset suggest a company preparing to transform how people interact with digital content. This is not just about games or entertainment, it's about productivity, communication, and human-computer interaction at a fundamental level. Apple's approach will likely focus on elegance, usability, and ecosystem integration, ensuring that whatever new technology emerges, it feels like a natural extension of the Apple experience. Health technology is also a central pillar of Apple's future. The Apple Watch has already redefined how consumers monitor health metrics, from heart rate to oxygen levels, and even detecting irregularities that can save lives. Future devices could expand these capabilities, positioning Apple as a key player in preventative healthcare, personal wellness, and even medical research. The implications are enormous. Technology not just as a tool, but as a partner in human longevity and well-being. Yet, challenges remain. Regulatory scrutiny is intensifying, global competition is fierce, and supply chain vulnerabilities can threaten even the most resilient organizations. Consumer expectations continue to rise. The market no longer tolerates incremental updates. Every launch, every innovation must deliver not just functionality, but a cultural impact. Apple must navigate these pressures while maintaining the quality, simplicity, and elegance that define its brand. Financially, Apple is well positioned. Its ecosystem ensures recurring revenue through services, while device sales continue to command a premium. But future growth may depend less on selling more devices and more on redefining how humans interact with technology itself through AI, AR, health, and potentially markets yet to be imagined. The broader lesson from Apple's journey is clear. Innovation is continuous, not static. Past dominance does not guarantee future success. A company must anticipate trends, embrace disruption, and reimagine its role in the world. Apple's philosophy, "Stay hungry, stay foolish," remains its guiding principle. It is a brand that understands that the next breakthrough often lies beyond the horizon, waiting for those bold enough to pursue it relentlessly. As we look ahead, the world can expect Apple to continue shaping technology, culture, and industry standards. What devices, experiences, or ecosystems will it create next? Which boundaries will it challenge, and which industries will it redefine? The answer is uncertain, but one thing is clear. Apple will not simply follow the future, it will strive to invent it. Apple's journey is nothing short of extraordinary. From a tiny garage in California to a global powerhouse valued in the trillions, the company has redefined what it means to innovate, scale, and dominate. Its story is not merely about products, it is about vision, resilience, culture, and the relentless pursuit of excellence. Every setback, every misstep, every triumph has contributed to a narrative that is as instructive as it is inspiring. What sets Apple apart is its unwavering focus on experience. It doesn't just make devices, it crafts ecosystems, narratives, and emotions. Customers don't simply use Apple products, they engage with a philosophy, a lifestyle, a vision of what technology can and should be. This is the essence of Apple's enduring success, an unbroken chain of innovation, strategy, and storytelling. The lessons are clear for any business-minded listener. Vision must be paired with execution. Risk must be embraced yet calculated. Innovation cannot exist in isolation. It must resonate with people, culture, and context. Leadership must balance ambition with empathy, creativity with discipline. Apple's path illuminates how extraordinary outcomes are achieved through relentless focus, bold bets, and a willingness to learn from failure. Yet the story also leaves us with questions, a sense of anticipation. What will Apple create next? Which industries will it transform? How will it continue to shape culture, redefine technology, and inspire the next generation of innovators? The answers remain unwritten, but the journey promises to be as captivating as the decades that have already passed. If this story has sparked your curiosity, consider exploring more journeys like Apple's, companies that have challenged the impossible, disrupted industries, and shaped the world.
Subscribe to continue following these narratives, uncovering strategies, secrets, and lessons that can inspire your own ventures. Every innovation, every strategic move, every story has insights waiting to be discovered, and the next story might just change the way you think about business forever. Apple's journey reminds us of one enduring truth. Great brands are not built overnight. They are crafted through vision, perseverance, and a relentless drive to shape the future. And in watching their story unfold, we glimpse not just the past, but the possibilities of what comes next.